Carol Higgins Clark, along with being in the family business of writing suspense novels, you're also an actress and have done a number of audio books of your own books, as well as your mother's, Mary Higgins Clark's novels. And you've won an award for this. Your latest book, Cursed, is a main selection of the Mystery Guild and is on the bestseller list. This is, I believe, your 12th?
It's my 12th.
Reagan Riley mystery?
Yes.
Tell us when you started writing and when you went to the suspense genre, if you will.
Well, my first book was published in 1992, 17 years ago, and I had started by retyping my mother's books before computers, and I was pursuing an acting career, and then I did a few of her audio books, and the producer said, you should try writing. Write a part maybe you could play, and a publisher was interested, and I came up with Reagan Riley. They said, make her mother a mystery writer. I said, okay. And I wrote my first book, which was about a murder on a cruise ship, and that was called Decked. And then my second was a murder at a pantyhose convention, so I said, well, this will be snagged, and now the 12th one is Cursed.
So this set the pattern for
Yes.
the single word titles for your novels. Introduce us, if you will, to Cursed. Give us a bit of an overview of what's happening in Reagan Riley's life in this novel.
Well, Reagan is now married and living in New York City. She's married to the head of the Major Case Squad. He's away at a law enforcement seminar. She gets a call from an old neighbor in Los Angeles, a woman who's a hairdresser, 28 years old. Abigail believes her life is cursed. She was born on Friday the 13th. Everything happens to her. And she was given $10,000 a year by her grandmother to go towards buying a home. Here it is 10 years later. She lent it to a boyfriend who disappeared, and now her grandmother is coming out to buy her an apartment and will need that money. And she's terrified to tell her grandmother. And she calls Reagan to please come out and help her find this guy because he's been spotted in downtown Los Angeles. And that's basically the beginning. And then there's also a murder that Abigail becomes a suspect in. So
It continues to get entangled. And we should say also that Grandma Ethel is a bit of a piece of work. So.
She's a good. I like Grandma Ethel. So yeah, Abigail is a little worried to break the news to her that her money's gone.
Yes, absolutely. I'm curious to know what the upside and downside is of having a reoccurring character. Is this like an old friend that sort of lives in your head and you sort of plan organically about her in between writing, or does
Yes.
she just come up when you're writing?
No, I think Reagan, it does feel like she's an old friend, and Jack, and it's nice when I do signings the other day. Someone said to me, I wish Reagan were my sister, and that kind of thing. So that's very nice. And someone said, I like Jack so much. I wish he were my boyfriend or my husband. So it's nice to get back together with them because I always create new secondary characters, of course. But to go back and join them for a visit while I'm writing a new book, I think is fun.
Right.
And so that doesn't bother me having I don't see it as a difficulty having a recurring character.
If you would, read us a little bit from Cursed.
From Cursed, okay. Well, this is when Abigail first calls Reagan and her cell phone starts ringing. From the area code, she could tell it was a Los Angeles number. Hello, Reagan said as she gratefully sank behind the wheel and turned on the ignition. Reagan, it's Abigail. Abigail, how are you? It was a question Reagan was almost afraid to ask. A former neighbor, Abigail Feeney, had moved into the apartment across the hall from Reagan in a building in the Hollywood Hills not long before Reagan moved back to New York. A hairdresser who worked in film and television, Abigail believed she'd been cursed since birth. Not only was she born on Friday the 13th, her parents had unwittingly given her a name that, combined with Feeney, added up to 13 letters. In Abigail's book, that was a bad start. Since then, she'd had her share of unlucky things happen to her, including breaking her leg in the 8th grade just before a class trip, graduation, and all the swim parties. In high school, she came down with the chicken pox right before her prom. As an adult, she'd been unlucky in love more times than she liked to count. Shortly before Reagan moved to New York, Abigail had met a guy she really liked, a guy that Reagan instinctively didn't trust.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Again, back to Reagan Riley and a reoccurring character. Do you have to plan a couple of books ahead when you have a major change in a character's life? For instance, she got married in the book prior to this.
She got married in Hitched, and then she honeymooned in Laced, and then I had her in a blackout in Zapped. And no, I think that was the big change, getting her married, of course. And now living with Jack, I'm not going to make any big changes. People say, are they going to have children? Well, not for a while. I'm not going to do that. It's more just coming up with a new crime each time that she'd be involved in solving. And in this particular book, Jack isn't very involved. He's at the law enforcement seminar. So the next book, I will want him to be more involved. So that's really basically the way I work with it. Just think of a new setting for her, or maybe it will be in New York City. I'm not sure.
And you live both in Los Angeles and New York City?
Mostly in New York. I just bought an apartment in Los Angeles. And actually, in the book, the boyfriend, the reason he hasn't called her is because he's in jail for traffic violations. I bought this apartment. I had a guy who was supposed to do work on it, molding and painting. He told me he'd done it. And then when I got back to Hollywood after I finished the book, I opened the door. The molding was all over the floor. I called him and I said, you told me you had done this. He said, well, I went to pay my traffic tickets. He'd been in jail for traffic violations. So I said, I was writing about this as my contractor was in jail. So I think I could be a psychic.
Like imitating art.
Yes.
Yes. Talk a little bit about process, if you would. Do you start with an outline? Do you come up with the crime, and that kind of sets the stage for the rest of it?
Yes, I knew I wanted to have Reagan go out there to help her, but I knew there had to be something else going on, that an old man is murdered. And I take a lot of notes. I buy poster boards, and I write ideas for characters and plots, and then I just sit down and start to write. I know where I'm heading, but things really happen as you're writing. It's not all plotted out for me. And sometimes you have to rearrange things a little bit, but I don't know how anybody can plot everything from the beginning. I know some writers can do it, it's not the way it works for me, because I'll be walking down the street and I'll think, oh, I know what I'll do. So it is kind of organic. It's a process.
I think that works for a lot of people. Also, I'm interested to know, too, whether you, in terms of doing the audiobooks, is it a tandem process? Do you write a book and then record it, or are they pretty separate in terms of time and space?
No, as soon as I finish the book, then I record the audio. It's done right away, because they always want the audio to come out at the same time as the book. And because we write the Christmas books, we're usually on a tight schedule. There's not a lot of time in between finishing the book and when it's published, because we've written 2 books a year several times. So it's all done at the same time, really.
I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for bringing us up to date on Reagan Riley's latest mystery.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on.
Please join us next week when I talk with Mary Higgins Clark, Carol Higgins Clark's mother, wrapping up our 3-part interview with the mother-daughter suspense novelist. You will find more information at wvxu.org. For Around Cincinnati, I'm Barbara Gray.